Hi, I'm CJ and this is my RC channel. In this video I'm continuing the build of the F3-RES 2-meter glider, and we're working on the tail feathers. Got everything covered. I did these in a transparent white just to give some accent to the bright purple transparent. And as you can see, I have cut away the covering. This is where it's going to attach to the tail boom. And I also took a rat tail file and slightly lengthened this groove almost to the edge, because I want to be able to use a monocoque type hinge or a tape hinge. So now I can slide this all the way to the rear there, and that makes it flush. So I'm going to be able to do a tape hinge just like that. So now I'm going to have to do this off camera because I'm going to be reaching in here with a one of these. Oh, damn it. I'm going to be taking some 5-minute epoxy, and I'm going to be reaching in here with the skewer and smearing a little bit of epoxy on either side of these joints here, so the rudder is firmly attached. And so I can't do that on camera, unfortunately, but I think you get the idea of how to do that, and I think you understand why I lengthened that, the groove. So I'm going to go ahead and take care of that and come back in a moment. By the way, these machinist blocks can be really handy for things like propping up your fuselage and holding it in position while you work on things. Okay, this is the original hatch, and I noticed that it had gotten itself a little bit of a warp. Also that when it was in place, it kept hopping up and pulling against the spring. It wasn't laying flat. And so I tried adding some wood to the bottom to brace it and flatten it out, and even then it still wanted to pop up, and it was kind of being a pain. I'm sure it's something I did somewhere along the way, because it definitely is a decent design. But I figured, okay, I'm going to make a fresh hatch, and while I was at it, I decided to give myself a little more room. So I cut about 3/4 of an inch off of the front end and made myself a new hatch. And I decided to use a little hatch latch that I had. So that was nice and easy to do. And I added a brace down the center just to make sure it stays flat after I cover it and whatnot. In any event, simple fix, and you don't have to do this. I do prefer this type of a latch, something that's guaranteed to not cause you problems in the air. Not that the stock one would, and it's definitely the lighter solution. If mine hadn't started acting weird on me, I'd still be happy with it. So your choice in how you do this. I did feel like it was a little small, because I want to make sure that I've got room to get batteries in. When this was over here, if I've got servos up in these front areas, or if I'm trying to put a receiver in there, getting a flight battery in and out seemed like it would be a bit of a pain. And so anyway, I went with that. So I'm going to add a little covering here and over this edge and cover this. And then I'm going to do servo mounting. So I thought I would create a faux canopy look with some fluorescent pink covering that I had, and it was fairly easy to do. I basically just turned the covering over. It's got a more paper than plastic-like surface, but if you're working with plastic, if you can find a marker that'll work on it, or a chalk or something like that. Basically, I took this, I drew out 3 parallel lines, giving me a center line and 2 outer edges that I calculated would wrap down the side, an appropriate distance, and then I scripted out this the elliptical ends for it and trimmed it, with a pair of scissors, peeled the covering, and then I covered the fuselage. I didn't cover it with the hatch on. That way I was able to cut down the center and make some trim lines, fold this over, and cover the upper edges here, and then I just covered this as a separate item, and there we go. So now it's time for radio. So let's rummage up some servos. And I've been thinking about how I'm going to do this. I don't think, well, these holes aren't the right size for these servos. If I had given this some thought ahead of time, I wouldn't have put in this piece of wood here. I would have put in my own panel later for servo mounting. It just takes up a lot of wood, a lot of space, because there's all this extra wood at the front and the rear, and even in between. They could have been closer. They could have been set staggered, so they would line up like this. A lot of things that could have been done different. They could have even been run side by side, and I think there's enough room for that, because I'm going to be running very short control arms. I like to make sure that I have as much granular control over the control surfaces, and if you use long control arms that have a lot of throw, you end up having a much greater effect per amount of stick movement, and there's no way to dial that out programmatically that doesn't reduce the precision of your action. And so you're better off using short control horns and programming extra throw, and like you can turn the rate of throw up to 110, 140, sometimes even 150%, depending on the radio, and get your extra motion that way. Yeah, see, that doesn't leave enough room for horns, really. But having these staggered will work just fine. So I'm going to think about this for a moment. I may just cut this down the center and pry it out and remove it all together and start fresh, or I may use it. I'm going to think about it for a second. So the installation process is ongoing. I decided to remove the stock servo mount panel. Because of the way it's cut, I would probably recommend most people not install that during your build-up. It's up to you. I found that the servos that I'm using, if I put them into the holes in the panel, the height the panel is mounted above the bottom sheeting, even if the servos are directly in the center, they touch bottom before they touch down onto the plywood, so they couldn't really be screwed in without putting in spacers or something. So I think it's better to do your own servo mounting, set it up how you want, just leave that panel out of there. Like I said, it took up a lot more space. There was a lot of extra wood that really wasn't necessary. So I've tacked these in place with thin CA, and I will hit them up with some epoxy and just fillet them up a little bit so that they are solid and aren't going to go anywhere. Now I'm going to start trimming up these Bowden tubes and the push rods, and I'll start rigging up the control horns and the connections. I have, before I mounted the servos, I made sure there was lots of space for the battery, and let me just go ahead and move the camera up a little bit so you can see. I can easily put the battery in place and probably just stick the receiver up in the front. I wanted to keep things as close to the front as possible. I debated moving the servos forward and having their weight be closer to the front, but the thing that kind of turned me off on that idea was the fact that I've got a battery connection up here. I'm going to have a BEC, and then that plugs into the receiver. So if I put the receiver behind the servos, I'm going to have a power line going back to the receiver, and that, you know, could make plugging the battery in problematic. I just felt it would be better to go ahead and put the receiver and the BEC up front here with the battery. And again, that is easy to remove without getting anywhere near the servos. And that's almost a 1,000 milliamp battery. That's a lot of power for you know, a craft this small. So and not very power hungry. You know, 2 main servos, the 3rd servo gets used once in a while. I could probably fly all day on this battery, so certainly for hours. In any event, I'm going to go ahead, as I said, and start trimming and rigging these control rods. Before I do that, though, I need to install the rear control horns, and I'll cover that in a moment. Okay, I did some work on the tail feathers, which I will show you later and explain. So I'm getting ready to start cutting push rods and cutting the tubing to size. First, I need to anchor these servos, so I'm using a twist drill and a 0.07 millimeter bit, and I'm going to drill some little pilot holes because this wood here is plywood. It's 3/16 inch ply, and I saturated it a bit from the edges on either side with thin CA so that it would bind the layers of plywood really well, and so it's not going to split apart when I start drilling into it or when I start putting screws in. At the same time, before I put screws in, I'm not just going to drive them into the wood and see if I can make it split. I'm going to drill pilot holes, and the screws will go in much easier. So I'm going to go ahead and do that without the camera right here under my nose, and I'll come back and show you in a moment. I ended up going up in bit size to a 1.2 millimeter bit, just because this was causing a lot more, it was just too much resistance. I didn't want to risk splitting the wood. I just want to show you a little trick on how to get these little screws in. I'm using a pair of curved tweezers to hold the screw just below the head of the screw, get it into position, and then screw it into place. And that's the last of them. So now the servos are firmly anchored. They're not going to go anywhere. and if I ever need to replace one of them, I can unscrew them and pull it out and put a new one in. So I gotta tidy up a few other little things in the tail section, and then I will, well, I might as well just show you right now. Hang on a moment. Gotta put some tools away here. Okay, there are certain things that if you're doing what I'm doing with the push rods, you need to just do a single block, and the I cut a second plywood spacer just to have a little bit more up there, but if you notice, the push rod is already starting to angle, and they also place the horn really close. I actually had to install it at about a 20-degree angle, 25-degree angle. Otherwise, it was going to be almost touching the boom. It's so close. So because I have the stab closer to the boom to keep this push rod in as close to a straight line as possible, I had to severely notch the stabilizer. But it's not a problem. There's a ton of wood here. It's all solid, so I just carve it out until I got enough of a down elevator, and so I wanted to have a little more than necessary. That's a good bit of angle there, but I'd rather have, you know, more than enough than not enough when you need to maneuver. But as you can see, that doesn't the push rod is already up. You know, it's already bending upwards, and that's fine. It's not going to hurt it, but you do want to keep this point and this point in as straight a line as possible. You always want to do that with any of your push rods. The straighter a line that they are, the less curving that they make and less bends, the more accurate and the less chance you're going to have of an off-centered surface. In other words, if this is the surface, when you press up, it returns to here. You press down and it returns to here, and you've got this variance. That's a really bad thing to have. And the best way to avoid that is, number one, smooth push rods that have, you know, little as resistance as possible, as little stiction in anywhere in the joints, like the joint here. You don't want this too tight. You don't want the hole so tight that it binds, things like that. And the other number one thing is having your push rods be as straight a line as possible from the servo to the horn. So anyway, another thing is that I don't know why they have the slot for the horn all the way down here on the rudder. I mean, I suppose you could cut some of the rudder away and have less of the rudder down below, like I have, but in any event, I had to cut my own slot for the horn. Now, I've got this one pinned right now. I'm gonna have to take this off. It's just a pair of swizzle sticks and some rubber bands, and these come in really handy, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to need to move this. I may even need to disconnect here, because I need to pull the push rods back, and I need to first trim the Bowden tubes to where I want them to be, as far into the fuselage as I want. Then I need to trim the push rods to fit these little end pieces and the clevises, so they will match up to the horn with a certain amount of variance in, you know, forward and back. So there's adjustability there. Now, so to do that, I need to be able to pull these control rods out of the way to trim the tubes. Then I need to trim the rods, and when I do the rods, I'm going to have them not only reconnected, but I'm going to have these little swizzle sticks on both surfaces, so both surfaces are centered, and that way I know where my center point is for the control rod at the other end of the the fuselage up in the nose where the servos are. I need that. I need the servo, I mean the rudder and the elevator to be in their center position with the push rod attached, so that I can see, okay, that's where I need to cut it now, so that I can, you know, fit this end piece onto it and have my clevis and have it attached to the horn with the horn in a neutral position. So anyway, that's what I'm going to be doing over the next couple of steps here. I just wanted to show you. As you may notice, I've put a little bit of paint here and here. It's nothing fancy. It's just some black enamel to cover up the wood and the fiberglass cloth that I used to strengthen that. Now, if you're using the pull cords, you can conceivably put several of these blocks to raise the stabilizer, and since you're using just a pull cord, it doesn't really matter the angle of it, but the more the angle, the more problematic they do tend to be, because it's going to be rubbing where it enters the fuselage. I don't know, I just think it's a little odd that it's set up that way. The other option would be to have a much longer horn on the stabilizer and then use a larger horn on your servo. But anyway, these things are kind of left up to you. They don't, you know, what instructions there are do not discuss radio setup or anything like that. They kind of leave that to the builder to, you know, figure out for themselves, use whatever system they like. So I have trimmed the Bowden tubes, and now I have used these little sticks with rubber bands to lock the rudder and stabilizer in their neutral position. Now I can start working on the push rods. Okay, I'm gonna have to kind of play operation here. Okay, so I have set up my servos. I reposition them. As you may notice, I've offset them so that the end of the horn is close to the edge here, but not tucked under it or up against it. So just gonna move this over so you can see the comparison. So now that I have them in place like this, I know that these barrels here are about that deep, right there, right to where it starts tapering in to go towards the threads. So that shows me my cut point. I need to cut my control rod right about there, and then I can put in some, I can pull this off, put some epoxy in the end of the tube, slide it onto here and let it dry, and then plug it in. Screw it down, and then it's set, and then I can move on to the next one. That's all there really is to it. It's very simple if you go through the steps of, you know, first, you know, getting your tail section set up, making sure your push rods have a nice clean action, and then pinning them in a neutral position so that your push rods are fixed into the radio area, and then cutting them to the correct length to match up to the sleeves here. Once you've you know, set up your horns and things like that, you know where things are. What I've done is I have screwed the clevis all the way up to the end of the threads and then backed it off a little less than halfway. So I've got several, about 3 millimeters, maybe almost 4, of travel forward and backwards, at least 3 millimeters forward and back of potential adjustment. But if I do this correctly, I won't need more than a couple of turns to make it spot on level at that end, if we're talking about the stabilizer, and if it's the rudder, you know, straight up and down. Anyway, like I said, this it becomes quite simple to do this and put it all together and have a nice outcome. So I'm gonna, I can't do this because the camera is about 2.5, 3 inches away from this item here at full zoom. So I'm gonna have to back this out. There's nothing for you to see. I'm just gonna be cutting that carbon fiber with a micro jeweler's blade saw, and then taking the horn off and plugging it in, mixing some glue, that kind of thing. What's important is that you see the relationship. And, you know, I can't move this. This is fixed because the tail section is fixed. And because these are such a straight line, and because I have done things like bring both Bowden tubes straight out from the tail here, letting them spread apart a little bit, coming up the side of the fuselage, tacking them down here on either side of this plate. This is a ballast mount, so that's no problem to. So you can see that these are almost a perfectly straight line back. They're not crossing each other inside the tail section. They come in and go right up to here and through. So I really don't even need to. Sorry about the jiggle. I really don't need to brace those tubes any further because of the stiffness of the carbon fiber rods, unless there is some flex in the rods from where they anchor onto the servo to this point here. If I see any bowing, I'll just go ahead and put a crossbar in right about here and glue them in, or start by anchoring them where they come into the as they pass through the bulkhead there. I could just put some CA on them or some 5-minute epoxy and glue them to the sidewall of that bulkhead. And that would be a pretty good start if, like I said, if there's any bowing from this point forward. So I'll just keep an eye on that as I test and you know, see if there's any resistance, and if it starts bowing, if the control rod is being displaced, if I try to force it, then I'll go ahead and tighten that down a bit. But otherwise, because they are really going in a virtual straight line, the only deviation is where they come out of the fuselage, and even that is fairly straight and smooth. That's at the tail. Everything is proceeding well, pretty much done. I have made a few little adjustments to the push rod length, just a few turns, things like that. Plugged everything in, got the receiver, which is under here. So that's all tucked in. And this is my 5-volt BEC. I just folded the wires a few times and used some thin 5mm wide tape to wrap this up so the wires are nice and secure. There's only about a 1/2 inch of wire from either end. It's plugged right into the battery and then into the receiver. I have a servo extension wire right here that is for the spoiler. This is far longer than it needs to be here on the wing. I could cut it and recrimp a new connector, but I'm probably just gonna fold it up a little bit and tie it off, you know, use either like a twist tie or a zip tie or some of that white tape to just you know, take in all this slack so I don't have to try to feed it into the wing. Anyway, that's done, and I have programmed the spoiler on a 3-position switch. So one position is down, the middle position is about halfway up, and the 3rd position opens the spoiler completely. I thought it would be nice to have a midpoint, so you know, a small amount of lift killed that way. As you can see, that large battery, fits right in here. It's one of these. And there's plenty of space on either side of it. If I need to add ballast, that's no problem at all. If you recall, I left the nose cone open, and I cut a hole in the forward bulkhead so that if I do need to add some lead or whatever, I can add it to the very front of the nose. Just put in some lead and pour in a little bit of 5-minute epoxy to hold it in place, make it a permanent resident. We'll see if I even need that. And so here's my new hatch, and I have a hole for one of the antenna leads. So one of the antenna leads comes out the top. And the other antenna lead comes out the side of the fuselage here, right here. So the thing with 2.4 gigahertz antennas, the best way is to have them be at a 90-degree angle to each other. So this way I've got one up and one coming out the side. So that gives me that setup there. I don't need all of this sticking out. I just need a little bit of a whisker there, like that. So there we go. It's built. I'm gonna put the wing on, and I'm going to balance it out, see how my center of gravity is doing. So I put the plane on my balancing stand, and it was a little bit tail heavy in spite of the larger battery up front. The recommendation from HyperFlight is batteries ranging from 300 to 750 milliamp, and I'm running 950 milliamps. The kit recommends 70 to 72 millimeters from the leading edge as the CG point. I put 4.7 grams of lead and enough epoxy to hold it in place in the hollowed out cavity in the nose cone ahead of the forward bulkhead, and that balanced it right out to between 69 and 70 millimeters from the leading edge. And my experience is better a little nose heavy than a little tail heavy, especially on first flights. So I'm happy with that setup for the moment. I also put the plane on a scale, and it weighed in at 442.9 grams. The specs on the kit on HyperFlight's website say the flying weight from 435 grams and up. So that puts me 8 grams over the minimum weight. So I'm very pleased with that too, especially since I'm using a larger battery, and I went for a heavier push rod setup versus the pull cords. I think everything came out very well. I'm very pleased. I'm hoping to get my maiden flight in here shortly, but it's been pouring rain, and there's a hurricane that's about to hit the East Coast, so I may not get a chance to fly for a few days to a week. We'll see how it goes. I'm going to go over the wing and tail surfaces and the fuselage and just make sure the covering's nice and tight, see if there's any loose spots that need to be tightened up. But otherwise, it's complete. So, happy day. It took a little while, but you know, that's because I'm filming all this and trying to pass on as much info for you guys as possible. But you know, as you can see, there's plenty of space in here. When I plug the battery into the BEC and tuck the connection underneath, there's still plenty of room left. There's all this backspace here. I can pull the battery out nice and easy. I just need to move the BEC aside, and the receiver can stay right where it is. The receiver is wide enough to fit in the fuselage. It doesn't drop in between these 4x4 rails, but it sits on them, and it's slid rearward right up against the servo. So you know, everything's great. I'm really happy with this kit. I highly recommend it. It's an easy kit to build. It's not simple. There are some tricks, as you've seen throughout these videos, but it does go together very smoothly, and the result is exceptional. You know, if you recall, the accuracy on the dihedral was just outstanding. A hundredth, 1/100th of a degree of difference from left to right. So anyway, I've just received the second one of these 2 days ago, and so I am going to be I've got another kit ahead of that, but I'm going to start putting the second one together. That's the one that I'm going to be only have 2 points of dihedral. I'm going to have the outer wing sections be flat, and I'm going to be adding ailerons and flaps, and instead of having a spoiler. And so it's going to be a full boat, you know, powered 20 amp ESC, a little plush ESC. It's very small. It's not too much bigger than this BEC here. And nice little motor, swinging an 8-inch folding prop, and all those parts are coming in shortly. So that process is going to get built. You'll definitely see that flying before the end of the summer, as well as the little DLG that just came in, the Hawk. A lot of you have commented on that and are looking forward to seeing that. That's the next plane to start working on. I just ordered some new servos for it. So those servos are just ordered today, so I may start something else while I wait for the all that stuff to come in, because that is the big part of building that plane. It's not like I can start building the wing or something in the meantime. It's all about installing the radio gear, and until I have that, I can't do anything with it. So see how that goes. I've also got some nice car projects in the works. Been doing some racing on the weekends. Unfortunately, it looks like it's going to be raining tomorrow, so this week no racing, but that means I get to build. In any event, thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this series of videos on the F3-RES. I just can't say enough good things about this kit. I'm really pleased with the way it came together, the way it looks. It's one of those models that just has such a nice structure to it. It really lends itself to transparent covering. Some planes just aren't worthy of transparent covering, and this is one of those planes where you really want to see what it looks like under the skin. Please remember to click like, and please subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching.